Hey, what is up YouTube? It's Malone here, and I'm here with another great video for you guys today. Today I've got another Red Pyramid audiobook. We've got chapter 37 and 38 in this one. So I'm gonna try and get this book done today. And yeah, 37, 38. I'm gonna try and get the book done today, and hopefully we're able to do that. So let's go ahead and begin. We've got 2 more videos of this, and then we're done. Got it. Alright, chapter 37. Leroy Gets His Revenge, narrated by Carter. Maybe I'm a slow learner, okay? Because it wasn't until that moment, facing the god Set in the middle of his throne room in the heart of an evil pyramid, with an army of demons outside and the world about to explode, that I thought, coming here was a really bad idea. Set rose from his throne. He was red-skinned and muscular, with fiery armor and a black iron staff. His head shifted from bestial to human. One moment, he had the hungry stare and slavering jaws of my old friend Leroy, the monster from D.C. Airport. The next, he had sandy hair and a handsome but harsh face, with intelligent eyes that sparkled with humor and a cruel, crooked smile. He kicked our uncle out of the way and almost groaned, which at least meant he was alive. I was clenching my sword so tight the blade trembled. Zaya was right, I said. You possessed Almos. Set spread his hands, trying to look modest. Well, you know, it wasn't a full possession. Gods can exist in many places at once, Carter. Horace could tell you that if he was being honest. I'm sure Horace has been looking for a nice war monument to occupy. Or a military academy somewhere. Anything but that scrawny little form of yours. Most of my being has now transferred to this magnificent structure. He swept his arm proudly across the throne room. But a sliver of my soul was quite enough to control Almos Kane. He held out his pinky and a wisp of red smoke snaked toward Almos, sinking into his clothes. Almos arched his back like he'd been hit by lightning. Stop it! I yelled. I ran toward Almos, but the red mist had already dissipated. Our uncle's body went slack. Set dropped his hand as if bored with the attack. Not much left, I'm afraid. Almos fought well. He was very entertaining, demanding much more energy than I had anticipated. That chaos magic, that was his idea. He tried his best to warn you, to make it obvious I was controlling him. The funny thing is, I forced him to use his own magic reserves to pull out those spells. He almost burned out his soul trying to send you those warning flares. Turn you into a storm? Please, who does that anymore? You're a beast, Sadie shouted. Set gasped in mock surprise. Really? Me? Then he roared with laughter as Sadie tried to drag Almos out of harm's way. Almos was in London that night, I said, hoping to keep his attention on me. He must have followed us to the British Museum, and you've been controlling him ever since. Desjardins was never your host. Oh, that commoner? Please, Set sneered. We always prefer Blood of the Pharaohs, as I'm sure you've heard. But I did love fooling you. I thought the bonsoir was an especially nice touch. You knew my ball was there, watching. You forced Almos to sabotage his own house so your monsters could get in. You made him walk into an ambush. Why didn't you just have him kidnap us? Set spread his hands. As I said, Almos put up a good fight. There were certain things I could not make him do without destroying him completely, and I didn't want to ruin my new plaything quite so soon. Anger burst inside of me. Almos's odd behavior finally made sense. Yes, he had been controlled by Set, but he'd been fighting it all the way. The conflict I'd felt in him had been his attempts to warn us. He'd almost destroyed himself trying to save us, and Set had thrown him aside like a broken toy. Give me control, Horace urged. We will avenge him. I've got this, I said. No, Horace said. You must let me. You are not ready. Set laughed as if he could sense our struggle. Oh, poor Horace. Your host needs training wheels. You seriously expect to challenge me with that? For the first time, Horace and I had the same feeling at exactly the same moment. Rage. Without thinking, we raised our hand, extending our energy towards Set. A glowing fist slammed into him, and the red god flew backward with such force he cracked a column, which tumbled down on top of him. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the trickle of dust and debris. Then out of the ruin came a deep howl of laughter. Set rose from the ruins, tossing aside a huge chunk of stone. Nice, he roared. Completely ineffective, but nice. It will be a pleasure chopping you to bits, Horace, as I did your father before you. I will entomb you all in this chamber to increase my storm, all 4 of my precious siblings, and the storm will be large enough to envelop the world. I blinked momentarily, losing my focus. 4? Oh yes. Set's eyes drifted to Zaya, who had quietly retreated to one side of the room. I haven't forgotten you, my dear. Zaya glanced at me in desperation. Carter, don't worry about me. He's trying to distract you. Lovely goddess, Set purred. The form does not do you justice, but your choices were limited, weren't they? Set moved toward her, but his staff beginning to glow. No, I shouted. I advanced, but Set was just as good at magical shoving as I was. He pointed at me and I slammed against the wall, pinned as if an entire football team were holding me down. Carter, Sadie cried. She's Nephthys. She can take care of herself. No. All my instincts told me Zaya couldn't be Nephthys. At first I thought so, but the more I considered, the more it seemed wrong. I felt no divine magic from her, and something told me I would have if she were really hosting a goddess. Set would crush her unless I helped, but if Set was trying to distract me, it was working. As he stalked towards Zaya, I struggled against his magic, but I couldn't free myself. The more I tried to combine my power with Horace's, the way I'd done before, the more my fear and panic got in the way. You must yield to me, Horace insisted, and the two of us wrestled for control of my mind, which gave me a splitting headache. Set took another step towards Zaya. Ah, Nephthys, he crooned. At the beginning of time, you were my treacherous sister. In another incarnation, in another age, you were my treacherous wife. Now I think you'll make a nice appetizer. True, you're the weakest of us all, but you're still one of the 5, and there is power in collecting the complete set. He paused, then grinned. The complete set? That's funny. Now let's consume your energy and entomb your soul, shall we? Zaya thrust out her wand. A red sphere of defensive energy glowed around her, but even I could tell it was weak. Set shot a blast of sand from his staff, and the sphere collapsed. Zaya stumbled backward, the sand ripping at her hair and clothes. I struggled to move, but Zaya yelled, Carter, I'm not important. Stay focused and don't resist. She raised her staff and shouted, The House of Life! She launched a bolt of fire at Set, an attack that must have cost all of her remaining energy. Set batted the flames aside, straight at Sadie, who had to raise her wand quickly to protect herself, and almost from getting fried. Set tugged at the air as if pulling an invisible rope, and Zaya flew toward him like a rag doll straight into his hand. Don't resist. How could Zaya say that? I resisted like crazy, but it didn't do me any good. All I could do was stare helplessly as Set lowered his face to Zaya's and examined her. At first, Set seemed triumphant, gleeful, but his expression quickly turned to confusion. He scowled, his eyes flaring. What trick is this? He growled. Where have you hidden her? You will not possess her, Zaya managed, her breath choked off by his grip. Where is she? He threw Zaya aside. She slammed against the wall and would have slid into the moat, but Sadie yelled wind, and a gust of air lifted Zaya's body just enough for her to tumble onto the floor. Sadie ran over and dragged her away from the glowing trench. Set roared. Is this your trickery, Isis? He sent another blast of sandstorm against them, but Sadie held up her wand. The storm met a shield of force that deflected the wind around it. The sand pitted the walls behind Sadie, making a halo-shaped scar on the rock. I didn't understand what Set was so angry about, but I couldn't allow him to hurt Sadie. Seeing her alone, protecting Zaya from the wrath of a god, something inside me clicked, like an engine shifting into higher gear. My thinking suddenly became faster and clearer. The anger and fear didn't go away, but I realized they weren't important. They weren't going to help me save my sister. Don't resist, Zaya had told me. She didn't mean resisting Set, she meant Horus. The falcon god and I had been wrestling with each other for days as he tried to take control of my body. But neither of us could be in control. That was the answer. We had to act in unison, trust each other completely, or we were both dead. Yes, Horus thought, and he stopped pushing. I stopped resisting, letting our thoughts flow together. I understood his power, his memories, and his fears. I saw every host he had ever been in over 1,000 lifetimes, and he saw my mind. Everything. Even the stuff I wasn't proud of. It's hard to describe the feeling, and I knew from Horus's memory that this kind of unison was very rare. Like the one time when the coin doesn't land heads or tails, but stands on its edge, perfectly balanced. He did not control me, and I did not use him for power. We acted as one. Our voices spoke in harmony. Now, and the magic bonds that held us shattered. My combat avatar formed around me, lifting me off the floor and encasing me with a golden energy. I stepped forward and raised my sword. The falcon warrior mimicked the movement, perfectly attuned to my wishes. Set turned and regarded me with cold eyes. So, Horus, he said, you managed to find the pedals of your little bike, eh? That does not mean you can ride. I am Carter Kane, I said, blood of the pharaohs, eye of Horus, and now, Set, brother, uncle, and traitor, I'm going to crush you like a gnat. Chapter 38, The House is in the House, narrated by Carter. It was a fight to the death, and I felt great. Every move was perfect. Every strike was so fun I wanted to laugh out loud. Set grew in size until he was larger than me, and his iron staff the size of a boat's mast. His face would flicker, sometimes human, sometimes the feral maw of the Set animal. We clashed sword against staff, and sparks flew. He pushed me off balance, and I smashed into one of his animal statues, which toppled to the floor and broke. I regained my balance and charged, my blade biting into a chink of Set's shoulder guard. He howled as black blood seeped from the wound. He swung his staff, and I rolled before the strike could split my head. His staff cracked the floor instead. We fought back and forth, smashing pillars and walls with chunks of the ceiling falling around us, until I realized Sadie was yelling to get my attention. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her trying to shield Zaya and Amos from the destruction. She'd drawn a hasty protection circle on the floor, and her shields were deflecting the falling debris. But I understood why she was worried. Much more of this, and the entire throne room would collapse, crushing all of us. I doubted it would hurt Set much. He was probably counting on that. He wanted to entomb us here. I had to get him into the open. Maybe if I gave Sadie time, she could free Dad's tomb from that throne. Then I remembered how Bast had described her fight with Apophis, grappling with the enemy for eternity. Yes, Horus agreed. I raised my fist and channeled a burst of energy toward the air vent above us, blasting it until red light once again poured through. Then I dropped my sword and launched myself at Set. I grabbed his shoulders with my bare hands, trying to get him in a wrestler's hold. He attempted to pummel me, but his staff was useless at close range. He growled and dropped the weapon, then grabbed my arms. He was much stronger than I was, but Horus knew some good moves. I twisted and got behind Set, my forearm slipping under his arm and grabbing his neck and vise. We stumbled forward, almost stepping on Sadie's protective shields. Now we've got him, I thought. What do we do with him? Ironically, it was Amos who gave me the answer. I remembered how he turned me into a storm, overcoming my sense of self by sheer mental force. Our minds had had a brief battle, but he had imposed his will with absolute confidence, imagining me as a storm cloud, and that's what I had become. You're a fruit bat, I told Set. No, his mind yelled, but I had surprised him. I could feel his confusion, and I used it against him. It was easy to imagine him as a bat, since I'd seen Almost become one when he was possessed by Set. I pictured my enemy shrinking, growing leathery wings and an even uglier face. I shrank too until I was a falcon with a fruit bat in my claws. No time to waste. I shot toward the air vent, wrestling with the bat as we spun in circles up the shaft, slashing and biting. Finally we burst into the open, reverting to our warrior forms on the side of the red pyramid. I stood uneasily on the slope. My avatar shimmered with damage along the right arm, and my own arm was cut and bleeding in the same spot. Set rose, wiping black blood from his mouth. He grinned at me, and his face flickered with the snarl of a predator. You can die knowing you made a good effort, Horus, but it's much too late. Look. I gazed out over the cavern, and my heart crawled into my throat. The army of demons had engaged a new enemy in battle. Magicians, dozens of them, had appeared in a loose circle around the pyramid, and were fighting their way forward. The House of Life must have gathered all of its available forces, but they were pathetically few against Set's legions. Each magician stood inside a moving protective circle, like a spotlight beam wading through the enemy with staff and wand glowing. Flames, lightning, and tornadoes ripped through the demon host. I spotted all kinds of summoned beasts, lions, serpents, sphinxes, and even some hippos charging through the enemy like tanks. Here and there, hieroglyphs glowed in the air, causing explosions and earthquakes that destroyed Set's forces. But more demons just kept coming, surrounding the magicians in deeper and deeper ranks. I watched as one magician was completely overwhelmed, his circle broken in a flash of green light, and he went down under the enemy wave. This is the end of the house, Set said with satisfaction. They cannot prevail as long as my pyramid stands. The magicians seemed to know this. As they got closer, they sent fiery comets and bolts of lightning toward the pyramid, but each blast dissipated harmlessly against its stone slopes, consumed in the red haze of Set's power. Then I spotted the golden capstone. 4 snake-headed giants had retrieved it and were carrying it slowly but steadily through the melee. Set's lieutenant, Face of Horror, shouted orders to them, lashing them with a whip to keep them moving. They pressed forward until they reached the pyramid's base and began to climb. I charged toward them, but Set intervened in an instant, and placing himself in my path. I don't think so, Horace, he laughed. You won't ruin this party. We both summoned our weapons to our hands and fought with renewed ferocity, slicing and dodging. I brought my sword down in a deadly arc, but Set ducked aside and my blade hit stone, sending a shockwave through my whole body. Before I could recover, Set spoke a word. Hawaii. Strike. The hieroglyphs exploded in my face and sent me tumbling down the side of the pyramid. When my vision cleared, I saw a face of horror and the snake-headed giants far above me, lugging their golden load up the side of the monument, only a few steps from the top. No, I muttered. I tried to rise, but my avatar form was sluggish. Then, out of nowhere, a magician catapulted into the midst of the demons and unleashed a gale of wind. Demons went flying, dropping the capstone, and the magician struck it with his staff, stopping it from sliding. The magician was Desjardins. His forked beard and robes and leopard skin cape were singed with fire, and his eyes were full of rage. He pressed his staff against the capstone, and its golden shape began to glow. But before Desjardins could destroy it, Set rose up above him and swung his iron rod like a baseball bat. Desjardins tumbled, broken and unconscious, all the way down the pyramid, disappearing into the mob of demons. My heart twisted. I'd never liked Desjardins, but no one deserved a fate like that. Annoying, Set said, but not effective. This is what the House of Life has reduced itself to, eh, Horace? I charged up the slope, and again our weapons clanged together. We fought back and forth as gray light began to seep through the cracks in the mountain above us. Horace's keen sense told me we had about 2 minutes until sunrise, maybe less. Horace's energy kept surging through me. My avatar was only mildly damaged. My attack still swift and strong, but it wasn't enough to defeat Set, and Set knew it. He was in no hurry. With every minute, another magician went down on the battlefield, and chaos got closer to winning. Patience, Horace urged. We fought him for 7 years the first time. But I knew we didn't have 7 minutes, much less 7 years. I wished Sadie was here, but I could only hope she'd manage to free Dad and keep Zaya and Almost safe. That thought distracted me. Set swept his staff at my feet, and instead of jumping, I tried to back up. The blow cracked against my right ankle, knocking me off balance and sending me somersaulting down the pyramid's side. Set laughed. Have a nice trip. Then he picked up the capstone. I rose, groaning, but my feet were like lead. I staggered up the slope, but before I closed even half the distance, Set placed the capstone and completed the structure. Red light flowed down the sides of the pyramid with a sound like the world's largest bass guitar, shaking the entire mountain and making my whole body go numb. 30 seconds to sunrise, Set yelled with glee, and this land will be mine forever. You can't stop me alone, Horace. Especially not in the desert, the source of my strength. You're right, said a nearby voice. I glanced over and saw Sadie rising from the air vent, radiant with multicolored light, her staff and wand glowing. Except Horace is not alone, she said, and we're not going to fight you in the desert. She struck her staff against the pyramid and shouted a name, the last words I'd ever expect her to utter as a battle cry. Chapter 39, Zaya Tells Me a Secret, by Sadie. Cheers, Carter, for making me look dramatic and all that. The truth was a little bit less glamorous. Back up, shall we? When my brother, the crazy chicken warrior, turned into a falcon and went up the pyramid's chimney with his new friend, the fruit bat, he left me playing nurse to 2 very wounded people, which I didn't appreciate and which I wasn't particularly good at. Poor Amos's wounds seemed more magical than physical. He didn't have a mark on him, but his eyes were rolled up in his head and he was barely breathing. Steam curled from his skin when I touched his forehead, so I decided I'd best leave him for the moment. Zaya was another story. Her face was deathly pale, and she was bleeding from several nasty cuts on her leg. One of her arms was twisted at a bad angle. Her breath rattled with a sound like wet sand. Hold still. I ripped some cloth from the hem of my pants and tried to bind her leg. Maybe there's some healing magic or... Sadie, she gripped my wrist feebly. No time. Listen. We can stop the bleeding. His name. You need his name. But you're not Nephthys. Set said so. She shook her head. A message. I speak with her voice. The name. Evil Day. Set was born, and it was an evil day. True enough, I thought, but could that really be Set's secret name? What Zaya was talking about, not being Nephthys, but speaking with her voice, it made no sense. Then I remembered the voice at the river. Nephthys had said she would send a message, and Anubis had made me promise I would listen in Nephthys. I shook uncomfortably. Look, Zaya. Then the truth hit me in the face. Some things Iskandar had said Something Staff had said. They all clicked together. Iskandar had wanted to protect Zaya. He'd told me if he'd realized Carter and I were godlings sooner, he could have protected us as well. Someone. As well as someone. As well as Zaya. Now I understood how he'd try to protect her. Oh God, I stared at her. That's it, isn't it? She seemed to understand, and she nodded. Her face contorted with pain, but her eyes remained as fierce and insistent as ever. Use the name, bend set to your will, and make him help. Help? He just tried to kill you, Zaya. He's not the helping type. Go. She tried to push me away. Flames sputtered weakly from her fingers. Carter needs you. That was the one thing she might have said to spur me on. Carter was in trouble. I'll be back then, I promised. Don't, go anywhere. I stood and stared at the hole in the ceiling, dreading the idea of turning into a kite again. Then my eyes fixed on Dad's coffin, buried in the red throne. The sarcophagus was glowing like something radioactive, heading for meltdown. If I could only break the throne. Set must be dealt with first, Isis warned. But if I can free Dad, I stepped towards the throne. No, Isis warned, what you might see is too dangerous. What are you talking about? I thought irritably. I put my hand on the golden coffin. Instantly, I was ripped from the throne room and into a vision. I was back in the land of the dead, in the Hall of Judgment. The crumbling monuments of a New Orleans graveyard shimmered around me. Spirits of the dead stirred restlessly in the mist. At the base of the broken scales, a tiny monster slept. Amit, the Devourer. He opened one glowing yellow eye to study me, then went back to sleep. Anubis stepped out of the shadows. He was dressed in a black silk suit with tie and knotted, like he'd just come back from a funeral. Or possibly a convention for really gorgeous undertakers. Sadie, you shouldn't be here. Tell me about it, I said, but I was so glad to see him I wanted to sob with relief. He took my hand and led me towards the empty black throne. We have lost all balance. The throne cannot be empty. The restoration of Mott must begin here, in this hall. He sounded sad, as if he were asking me to accept something terrible. I didn't understand, but a profound sense of loss crept over me. It's not fair, I said. No, it's not. He squeezed my hand. I'll be here, waiting. I'm sorry, Sadie, I truly am. He started to fade. Wait! I tried to hold on to his hand, but he melted into mist along with the graveyard. I found myself back in the throne room of the gods, except it looked like it had been abandoned for centuries. The roof had fallen in along with half of the columns. The braziers were cold and rusty. The beautiful marble floor was as cracked as a dry lake bed. Bast stood alone next to the empty throne of Osiris. She gave me a mischievous smile, but seeing her again was almost too painful to bear. Oh, don't be sad, she chided. Cats don't do regret. But aren't you dead? That all depends. She gestured around her. The Duat is in turmoil. The gods have gone too long without a king. If Set doesn't take over, someone else must. The enemy is coming. Don't let me die in vain. But will you come back? I asked, my voice breaking. Please, I never even got to say goodbye to you. I can't. Good luck, Sadie. Keep your claws sharp. Bast vanished, and the scenery changed again. I stood in the Hall of Ages in the first gnome. Another empty throne, and Iskandar sat at its feet, waiting for a pharaoh who hadn't existed for 2,000 years. A leader, my dear, he said. Mott demands a leader. It's too much, I said. Too many thrones. You can't expect Carter. Not alone, Iskandar agreed, but this is your family's burden. You started the process. The Kanes alone will heal us or destroy us. I don't know what you mean. Iskandar opened his hand, and in a flash of light the scene changed one more time. I was back at the Thames. It must have been the dead of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, because the embankment was empty. Mist obscured the lights of the city, and the air was wintry. Two people, a man and a woman, stood bundled against the cold, holding hands in front of Cleopatra's Needle. At first, I thought they were a random couple on a date. Then with a shock, I realized I was looking at my parents. My dad lifted his face and scowled at the obelisk. In the dim glow of the street lamps, his features looked like chiseled marble, like the pharaoh's statues he loved to study. He did have the face of a king, I thought, proud and handsome. You're sure? He asked my mother. Absolutely sure. Mum brushed her blonde hair out of her face. She was even more beautiful than her pictures, but she looked worried. Eyebrows furrowed, lips pressed together. Like me when I was upset, when I looked in the mirror and tried to convince myself things weren't so bad. I wanted to call her, to let her know I was there, but my voice wouldn't work. She told me this is where it begins, my mother said. She pulled her black coat around her, and I caught a glimpse of her necklace. The amulet of Isis. My amulet. I stared at it, stunned, but then she pulled her collar closed and the amulet disappeared. If we want to defeat the enemy, we must start with the obelisk. We must find out the truth. My father frowned uneasily. He'd drawn a protective circle around them, blue chalk lines on the pavement. When he touched the base of the obelisk, the circle began to glow. I don't like it, he said. Won't you call on her help? No, my mother insisted. I know my limits, Julius. If I tried it again... My heart skipped a beat. Iskandar's words came back to me. She saw things that made her seek advice from unconventional places. I recognized the look in my mother's eyes, and I knew. My mother had communed with Isis. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to scream. My father summoned his staff and a wand. Ruby, if we fail... We can't fail, she insisted. The world depends on it. They kissed one last time as if since they were saying goodbye. Then they raised their staffs and their wands and began to chant. Cleopatra's needle glowed with power. I yanked my hand away from the sarcophagus. My eyes stung with tears. You knew my mother, I shouted at Isis. You encouraged her to open that obelisk. You got her killed. I waited for her to answer. Instead, a ghostly image appeared in front of me, a projection of my father shimmering in the light of the golden coffin. Sadie, he smiled. His voice sounded tinny and hollow, the way it used to on the phone when he called me from far away, from Egypt or Australia or God knows where. Don't blame Isis for your mother's fate. None of us understood exactly what would happen. Even your mother could only see bits and pieces of the future, but when the time came, your mother accepted her role. It was her decision. To die? I demanded. Isis should have helped her. You should have helped her. I hate you. As soon as I said it, something broke inside me. I started to cry. I realized I'd wanted to say that to my dad for years. I blamed him for Mom's death, blamed him for leaving me, but now that I'd said it, all the anger drained out of me, leaving me nothing but guilt. I'm sorry, I sputtered. I didn't. Don't apologize, my brave girl. You have every right to feel that way. You had to get it out. What you're about to do, you have to believe it's for the right reasons, not because you resent me. I don't know what you mean. I reached out to brush a tear from my cheek, but his hand was just a shimmer of light. He reached out. Your mother was the first in many centuries to commune with Isis. It was dangerous, against the teachings of the house, but your mother was a diviner. She had a premonition that chaos was rising. The house was failing. We needed the gods. Isis could not cross the duat. She could barely manage a whisper, but she told us what she could about their imprisonment. She counseled Ruby on what must be done. The gods could rise again, she said, but it would take many hard sacrifices. We thought the obelisk would release all the gods, but that was only the beginning. Isis could have given Mum more power, or at least Bast offered. No, Sadie, your mother knew her limits. If she had tried to host a god fully used divine power, she would have been consumed, or worse. She freed Bast and used her own power to seal the breach. With her life, she bought you some time. Me? But you and your brother have the strongest blood of any Kane in 3,000 years. Your mother studied the lineage of the pharaohs. She knew this to be true. You have the best chance at relearning the old ways and healing the breach between magicians and gods. Your mother began the stirring. I unleashed the gods from the Rosetta Stone, but it will be your job to restore Mott. You can help, I insisted, once we free you. Sadie, he said forlornly, when you become a parent, you may understand this. One of my hardest jobs as a father, one of my greatest duties, was to realize that my own dreams, my own goals and wishes are secondary to my children's. Your mother and I have set the stage, but it is your stage. The pyramid is designed to feed chaos. It consumes the power of other gods and makes Set stronger. I know, if I break the throne, maybe open the coffin, you might save me, Dad conceded, but the power of Osiris, the power inside me, would be consumed by the pyramid. It would only hasten the destruction and make Set stronger. The pyramid must be destroyed, all of it, and you know how that must be done. I was about to protest that I didn't know, but the feather of truth kept me honest. The way was inside of me. I'd seen it in Isis's thoughts. I'd known what was coming ever since Anubis asked me that impossible question. To save the world, would you sacrifice your father? I don't want to, I said. Please. Osiris must take his throne, my father said. Through death, life, it is the only way. May not guide you, Sadie. I love you. And with that, his image dissipated. Someone was calling my name. I looked back and saw Zaya trying to sit up, clutching weakly at her wand. Sadie, what are you doing? All around us the room was shaking. Cracks split the walls as if a giant were using the pyramid as a punching bag. How long had I been in a trance? I wasn't sure, but I was out of time. I closed my eyes and concentrated. The voice spoke almost immediately. Do you see now? Do you understand why I could not say more? Anger built inside of me, but I forced it down. We'll talk about that later. Right now, we have a god to defeat. I pictured myself stepping forward, merging with the soul of the goddess. I'd shared power with Isis before, but this was different. My resolve, my anger, even my grief gave me confidence. I looked Isis straight in the eye, spiritually speaking, and we understood one another. I saw her entire history, her early days grasping for power, using tricks and schemes to find the name of Ra. I saw her wedding with Osiris, her hopes and dreams for a new empire. Then I saw those dreams shattered by Set. I felt her anger and bitterness, her fierce pride and protectiveness for her young son Horus. And I saw the pattern of her life repeating itself over and over again through the ages, through 1,000 different hosts. Gods have great power, Iskandar had said, but only humans have creativity, the power to change history. I also felt my mother's thoughts, like an imprint on the goddess's memory. Ruby's final moments and the choice she'd made. She'd given her life to start a chain of events, and the next move was mine. Sadie! Zaya called again, her voice weakening. I'm fine, I said. I'm going now. Zaya studied my face and obviously didn't like what she saw. You're not fine. You've been badly shaken. Fighting Set in your condition would be suicide. Don't worry, I said. We have a plan. With that, I turned into a kite and flew up the air shaft towards the top of the pyramid. Alright guys, that is chapter... what is it? 37, 38, and 39 of The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. We've actually only got 2 chapters left in the book, guys. It's pretty good. Oh, I am tired. Sorry about that. Alright. Sorry for my darkened face. For some reason, the lighting in here is kind of odd. So, anyways, peace out.